Welcome everyone. Today we are going to have a look at the overview of the guest users in Azure Active Directory. In Azure Active Directory, basically every user falls into one of the two categories. They are either a member user or a guest user. Depending on which type of user you are, you have certain default permissions within the Azure Active Directory tenant. Member users are the users who are assigned to the tenant directly. They are given a username that is part of the domain. For example, if you have a domain called devopsinfo.org, so if you create that user locally in your Active Directory and sync them towards the Azure AD, uh, like they are a member user, or if you create a user directly in the Azure AD uh, and give them Azure AD P1, P2 license, or just you create an account, they are a member user by default. By default, they have the capability to manage the user profile, possibility to reset their own password via the self-service password reset portal if it is enabled and provisioned for all the users in your tenant. Well, coming to talk about the guest users are the users that are invited by any one of your user externally to anyone. So they have the limited capabilities by default and by design. For example, if I'm a user who is part of devopsinfo.org, I can invite anyone externally, provided if my org level settings and if my administrator has allowed me to invite the guest user, I can invite anyone externally from external domain, and he will be able to consume the data which is present in my Azure AD tenant. So guest users basically they are generally from a partner company that may be working on a project with your colleagues or within a company. During that scenario, like when a company is working with a partner, they may need access to certain applications for the collaboration. They also need to be part of your team. Office 365 applications like SharePoint Online, they want access on site. Uh, this is mainly required for their daily day-to-day operations. Unlike the members, the guests can manage their profile and password, but do not have the capability to read the directory information and register any applications in your tenant. There are multiple ways to control the guest access. We'll have a look at that shortly in the portal. So, while coming to talk about the guest users, let's go into uh, one of the example. So, this is one of my demo tenant where I have logged in into portal.azure.com. So here, for example, when I go to the users tab in the Azure Active Directory, I have an option to filter the user type. So when I click on the option for user type, I see a value, either it can be a guest or it can be a member. So as we described a few minutes back, member will have the most privilege in your tenant, and guest, they will have the least privilege based on the configuration that you have made on the organization level and also on your Office 365 settings. So when in my example, when I go and filter the user value guest, I see I have invited 4 guests in my demo tenant, and then basically the user principal name is created as example what you see here. Like for example, Satish at easycloudinfo.com. That's one of my another demo tenant where it just creates uh, for the naming purpose and also for easily identifiable. So it says, okay, Satish is this guest user is part of the domain easycloudinfo.com, and it populates with the value external, and then it just goes with my default domain name, which is devopscloud on microsoft.com. This is the domain which was registered when I uh, created this demo tenant. And also, if you scroll your mouse over the right, you see the identities. It's an external Azure AD. So all the guest user account, what you see in your tenant would be always the identity type of the external Azure AD. So having talked about this, let's see about what are the org level settings that can be defined in the organization level in the Azure AD. So I'm just going to my another tenant. So here I have basically I'm into the Azure Active Directory. In the Azure Active Directory, you just go into the user settings. In the user settings, when you scroll all the way down, you have an option for the external users, manage external collaboration settings. So when I click on the manage external collaboration settings, here I have the option to control the guest access. So within the collaboration settings, we can define what guest users can access, who is allowed to invite the guest users, and what are the restrictions on the collaboration on your tenant. So this is the org level settings that you can define. For example, in the guest users, I've set guest users have limited access to properties and memberships of directory objects. So here, having said this, like they'll be having only limited visibility of the membership of the directory objects. And also, like when I select guest users has access is restricted to properties and membership of their own directory. This is the most restrictive. When I choose this, even they will not be able to see what what are the group they are present. For example, they won't be able to go and see in the properties. Okay, what are the groups I'm part of? It's the most restrictive one. And when coming to talk about the guest invite settings, you have four options. Like anyone in the organization can invite guest users, including guest and non-admins. That's the most inclusive, but that will give the highest privilege to anyone in your tenant, and then you will see a lot of guest users, and it's very difficult to control how the data is being shared in your organization to the external guest accounts. Um, and you see the option like members and users are assigned to specific admin roles can invite guest users, including guests with members permissions. This is a good option because this is scoped to a particular admin role who can invite the guest users. And you see the last option, only users assigned to specific admin roles can invite guest users. That is a very good option. Um, and the last one is no one in the organization can invite users, including admins, most restrictive. So when you select this, nobody in your organization would be able to invite the guest users externally. So this is the the invite settings what we have, and then furthermore, there are external collaboration settings that can be controlled, when guest user access. When you go down, you see like allow invitations to be sent to any domain. So when you select this allow invitations to be sent to any domain, then anyone can send the guest invite to any other domain externally, and deny invitations to a specific domain. You can add few block lists like where they are not allowed to send the invites to others in externally. And the last option is allow invitations only to the specific domains. So you can choose a list of domains, for instance your partners who are who are eligible for collaboration in your organization. So in that case, you just simply collect the list, maintain it, and then the users will be able to send the guest invites only to that particular domain. So, and also you see the self-service sign up. The guest self-service sign up is disabled by default. And when you have that yes, it means that we can enable the self-service sign up for the guest users via the user flows associated with the applications in your directory. So yeah, so no means the applications cannot be enabled for the self-service sign-up, and require them to be invited to your directory. So that's also that. And For example, when you talk about the collaboration restrictions, it's always a good idea to select and keep the option allow invitations to only specific domains. So that's a very good idea. And apart from that, you have the guest users that can be controlled from the collaboration settings. Like for example, um, from the service level, let's take an example of Office 365. um, in Office 365, it can be controlled the SharePoint tenant level settings. In the SharePoint tenant level settings, in the OneDrive tenant level settings, you can set the guest access. And also in the teams, there are two types. It's a guest access and external user settings. So when we talk about the guest access in Teams, you get the full privilege with the guest access. You'll be able to add that particular user to any team, and then they can be part of your team. They'll be able to see all the files in your team in Microsoft Teams. But when you talk about external user, he's limited only for the peer-to-peer chat, and then peer-to-peer audio and video calling. You cannot add him to any of the um, uh, team. He won't be able to see the files that you're creating in the team. And for example, in Power BI, you can also control the external data sharing settings. And also in Exchange Online, you can have the calendar online sharing settings. Um, yeah, so like in Microsoft 365, if you have if you set these settings, in few cases they can take the precedence. For example, let me talk about the SharePoint. In the SharePoint, you set the permission to the highest level. However, in your guest in external collaboration, if you say no one in the organization can invite guest users, including admins. However, if your user is trying to add that particular external users into the SharePoint site as a permission, they would be able to access the site. So this is one of the option which is seen to be working for the SharePoint. In general, the Office 365 settings, if you have raised to highest privilege, there is a possibility it can take precedence. Yes. Having talked about that, let's just go into one of the demo, which I have already created for this purpose. Let me show you a small overview of what is our demo. So here I have the tenant, which is devopsinfo.org. In the devopsinfo.org, I have already invited um, the account Satish, which is present in the tenant easycloudinfo.com. So basically, when a user is invited, for example, here I have invited the user from here to easycloudinfo.com. The moment when the user is invited, he gets an email like this, like Satish Veerapandian invited you to access application within the organization. So the moment when I click on accept invitation, I'll be prompted to redirect and sign in into devopsinfo.org. um, so that's the message you see. If you accept this invitation, you will be sent to the URL, which is basically the not my tenant easycloud.info.com. It goes to the devopsinfo.org. And after that, you will be able to see the account automatically created. So that's how the moment when the user logs in, he is registered as a guest user in the tenant where he is going to consume the data or the application. So in this example, I have an enterprise app. Yes, I forgot to tell one of the option. Like if you have any enterprise apps that is registered in your tenant, there is an option to give access to that particular enterprise application even to the guest user by going into the group or users, adding the guest users to that. So in our case, like when I go to the enterprise applications, I have one of the app which is Poly created for this demo purpose. When I go into Poly, I'm just clicking on the users and groups. Here I've given access to two people, which is one of the users is the guest access. So I'm just going back as a guest user. The moment when I click on the accept invitation, which I've already done, but I'm just doing it again for this demo purpose. So you see, it's been redirecting to the tenant where I've given the access. And also one important thing that I wanted to tell you is in the guest access, you have option to enforce MFA. I have enforced MFA. I already logged in and I was challenged for MFA, and that's the reason it's not showing. So here in my example, I have logged into myapplications.microsoft.com, but in this case, I have logged in as a guest user. In the guest user, I see only the app Poly because when I go into DevOps info, I have given only access to the Poly and I have not given access to any of the applications. So that's the reason I see only Poly. I don't see any. Even if I go to my apps, I don't see anything because it gives me a message. This is unavailable due to your account permission on the company settings because this is a guest user and I have given permission only to the Poly. And By this, we would be able to control the user experience, and the guest users will not be able to see a lot of applications which is not supposed to see, and that's a way we control it via this option. And for example, I can also invite him to a SharePoint site. I think let me see if I have invited to any SharePoint site. um, or even I can go now. Let me go into the DevOps info, look for SharePoint. Yes, in the SharePoint, I'm just going to the test, or even I have a list. Let me invite them to the list. I have the test, and I go to the share option. In the share, I'm just typing Satish at easycloudinfo.com, which is external user. I give a message. I get a message immediately. Satish is outside the organization because I'm sending the invite from DevOpsinfo.org. That's perfectly fine. I'm sending a message. This is a test sharing for guest access SharePoint Online. Send. And the moment when I click on send, I come back to inbox, and then I will be able to see the invite. But there is one glitch. Whenever the guest access for SharePoint, you always see that it goes to the junk. Whenever the guest invite is sent to the Office 365 tenant, the guest invite for SharePoint Online always lands in the junk mailbox. So it's one of the point which we need to know. If you don't receive the guest invite, if you don't see them, it's always better to go and have a look at your junk. So when you click on next, I would be redirected, and yes, I see, and I have access from a guest account which is present in the easycloudinfo.com. Yes. So these are the settings that we can talk about the guest access. This is a small summary of overview of the guest access in the Azure AD. Um, it's like it's always as a summary and conclusion. I would say like you would come across a situation where you want to uh, create the guest access for one of your partner, where the users would be collaborating. Let's say they're going to collaborate with a partner, where the user is there are close to like 1,000 or 2,000 users, and they need to be invited to a tenant for some reason, for accessing a particular application. In that case, by default, it's not an easy option for every user to invite these users individually from their side. So you can have a strategy of bulk creating these guest user accounts. Like there is an option to bulk invite the guest user accounts. There is a command you can bulk invite the guest user account, and the moment when the guest user account is created, you would be they would be receiving the bulk invites, and the moment when they log in, all these guest user account will be registered in your Azure AD tenant. So if this is if the bulk invite of the guest user account is being done, so it's also very important to know that some planning needs to be done for joiners and leavers, because there is a possibility a lot of people can leave the organization where they no need the guest access anymore. So some strategy in terms of the governance needs to be put to look for accounts which is not logged in for more than 90 days. Just clean them up. There is an option in the Azure AD governance where you can have a look at the guest, where you can have a look at uh, the periodic evaluation of the guest user accounts. We'll have a look at them in the upcoming videos. Um, yes, and also if you talk about the joiners, yeah, there are a lot of joiners who can also be a part of this project where they need access to your applications in the tenant. In that case, some automation needs to be put in place so that no manual work is done. So like if any new users are joining, they should be able to automatically be invited to this tenant, so the manual intervention is not there anymore. So also the important thing is the periodic evaluation of the SharePoint online sites needs to be done, because the moment when the SharePoint online sites, not only SharePoint online sites, the Office 365 application, the periodic evaluation needs to be done for the guest user accounts as well. So having said that, I think this is the summary of the summary and overview of the guest user accounts in Azure AD. Feel free to subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. Thank you.